This brings the end of that particular point of the agenda, and we move on now. And thank you.
Boa tarde, colegas.
Good afternoon, colleagues. We'll continue with today's agenda. I can inform you that the minutes of yesterday's meetings and the approved texts have already been distributed. I see there have been no comment, so we'll consider those minutes to be adopted. Let's now move on to the next debate. This debate is the question time, and I would like to wish a very warm welcome to the High Representative and Vice President Joseph Borrell. So thank you for attending this question time with the members. The first subject is the relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan and the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh and the Lachin corridor. This question time will last for about 60 minutes. 1 minute for the question, 2 minutes for the response, 30 seconds for a follow-up question in the first round, 2 minutes for the answer. If there are follow-up questions, they have to be linked to the initial question, and if the members wish to ask a question, please use the Catch the Eye function on your consoles as usual. So you will speak from your own seat for asking the questions. So these are specific rules for this debate, and I'd like to ask speakers to respect their speaking time. You might need a few moments to register your request for a question, but please do so as early as possible. So let's start our debate. I'll start by giving the floor to our colleague, François-Xavier Bellamy, for the EPP group.
Monsieur le
President, High Representative, for 6 months now, the Lachin corridor has been closed, and the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh are in a kind of siege situation. This siege has led to the loss of pretty much everything. No drinking water, electricity, etc. And there's nothing happening in the European Union. In this Parliament, we have clearly set out our condemnation of this absolutely intolerable situation, but the Commission remains silent. The Council is basically blessing negotiations between the guilty party and the victim. It seems that violence will get the upper hand over law, and it seems that elementary justice will simply be trampled. The Court of Justice has condemned the blockade by Azerbaijan. This state terrorism has not resulted in any kind of sanction from the Council. The Commission itself seems to be unable to properly condemn this very serious violation of the fundamental rights of these people in Nagorno-Karabakh. Vice President, I'm expecting strong words from you and strong actions to ensure that Azerbaijan will retreat from its criminal actions and allow the people of Nagorno-Karabakh to benefit.
Muito obrigado.
Thank you very much. So, High Representative Joseph Borrell, you have a chance to reply.
The unilateral decision of Azerbaijan to set up this particular checkpoint is totally contrary to the efforts that have been made in order to build confidence and trust between the various parts, and particularly for the Armenians in Karabakh, this is a situation, they're stuck in that particular enclave. Now, the reference that was made, well, what's been done is what could be done. That is a particular mandate that exists right now, and the Lachin corridor is outside of the responsibility or the remit, the geographical remit of the mission. There are territorial zones, border areas with Armenia, which observe what's going on at the Lachin corridor, but the corridor itself is outside of the capabilities of the mission. It is not within their responsibility. So we're trying to find some sort of solution to this particular problem right now. Don't say that we're not doing anything. Just a couple of days ago, there was a very important meeting with the President of France, Scholz, Jean-Michel, was out there. And in Moldova, there's going to be another meeting with Michel. There's will be another one here in Brussels in July. In other words, we're doing everything that we can do on the diplomatic front from the Council. In other words, those responsible for the situation as far as finding some sort of resolution to this particular conflict. And the leaders have reiterated that they're ready to continue the negotiations and the recognition of the various sovereignties of territorial sovereignties of the various countries that are involved and embroiled in this conflict. Thank you.
Do you want to make a follow-up question? Please stick to the time.
Merci, Monsieur le Représentant.
Thank you very much, High Representative. Well, I talked about the negotiations, but can you accept it to taking place in the context of a crime that's been established by the International Court of Justice without doing nothing in response to the crime? There is a situation of fundamental injustice that is context to this debate between a guilty party and a victim. We cannot accept that. If we allow this to happen, well, we'll allow it in all other situations around the world. We rightly denounce situations where violence tries to overwhelm rights. The first thing we should do is to sanction the crime from Azerbaijan. Not a single sanction has been put on the table. I think that that's not really in line with the dignity of the European Union.
No comments at this stage. Okay. So we will continue. Sylvie Guillaume, you got the floor.
Monsieur le Haut-Représentant, chers collègues, High Representative, colleagues, since the resolution that was adopted on the 19th of January by the European Parliament on the humanitarian consequences of the blockade of Nagorno-Karabakh, the situation has worsened, and there's now a control point in the Lachin corridor, as my colleague said. This is an installation that violates the ceasefire declaration of the 9th of November 2020. As well as access to basic needs such as food and medicine. And the International Red Cross Committee has also been held up in its work. Attempts at mediation and peace, ensuring the security of the Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh has been announced. And yet, Azerbaijan has not taken any measures so far to try to put an end to this blockade. It should have been de-escalating and put an end to the current humanitarian catastrophe that is developing. Are there any concrete initiatives being taken to unblock this situation on the ground? And can you tell us about any achievements made by the civil operations from the EU in Armenia and on the ground? Thank you.
High Representative.
Well, your question has a lot to do with what was asked in the previous question, and inevitably the response will be very similar to my previous response. Now, the mission that has been undertaken on the Armenian side of the border is a very important part of our efforts in order to try to make progress in the peace process, essentially, between the two countries. But it is exclusively of a civilian nature. It is not an armed mission, so to say, and all the members of that particular mission, including the commander there, are civilians. They're not military personnel that have a 2-year mandate. They have 100 people which have been quickly deployed, and we feel that an important contribution is being made as far as the normalization in the border region. we also feel that it's contributing to facilitate the efforts that are being made, and to those to which I made reference earlier on in the process, which has been initiated by the President of the Council in order to promote for normalization between the two countries. But this particular mission has very, very clear delineated limits. It is not a peace process. It is part of the process of peace, limited by the civilian character that it has, limited by the fact that it can only be active on the Armenian side of the border. Azerbaijan has not allowed for the mission to be active on its side of the border. And please don't ask for things that cannot be done by the mission. It does what it can, but it can't do more outside of its remit. And it, of course, outside of the capabilities that it has as far as logistics and resource as well. Now, the Lachin corridor, the efforts that are being made and the activities that are being undertaken there are contrary to the peace effort being made. We've asked for Azerbaijan and the international community has asked Azerbaijan to allow for access to Nagorno-Karabakh through this particular checkpoint under the auspices of the United Nations right now. We've asked for that, but we do not have coercive powers or the force to be able to call for that beyond what we've done.
Oui, juste un mot pour confirmer.
Well, just briefly to say that together with those present here, you're probably going to get quite a lot of similar questions on this topic, but this shows that we want to draw attention to the situation. That's why we wanted to have this point. I understand that it's not a peace mission, but my question was about the humanitarian conditions and sanitary conditions on the ground. We've heard that the Red Cross no longer has access to the area, 120,000 people, 30,000 children, lives at risk. That's why we are asking these types of questions on the diplomatic sides, but also on the specific humanitarian issues as well.
Thank you very much. High Representative, to respond.
I share your concern, ladies and gentlemen. I know that the socioeconomic situation in the affected communities is very serious indeed. And over the last 2 years, we have initiated a number of different projects and programs for humanitarian aid with the services of ECHO as well. We've participated. 17 million euros have been earmarked for that. Of course, that hasn't resolved the problem, but at least we take note of the fact that indeed we are doing things there. A number of different projects, once again, undertaking with those 17 million euro invested in order to provide for emergency services, healthcare services, including psychological support, medical equipment, and urgent assistance for individuals affected by the conflict. And indeed, we're doing demining of the region. Much is being done on that particular front. Recently, we also launched an additional project in order to demine areas in the Armenian territory as well. So I understand. I indeed share your concerns, and of course more could be done. But please allow me to say that indeed we are doing something at least. And I think indeed that ought to be recognized. It is, of course, illustrated by the funds earmarked.
We move on to the Renew Group, and I give the floor to Karen Melchior.
Herr formand, mange tak, høje repræsentant. Armenien og Azerbaijan.
Thank you very much. Armenia and Azerbaijan have got a peace agreement in place, which includes an agreement over Nagorno-Karabakh. So there is not a conflict, rather you have a peace agreement where the Lachin corridor is part of it. However, there is no access to the Lachin corridor. Is there an interpreting problem? Does it work? Can you hear me? Yes, the Lachin corridor is part of the peace agreement where access to Nagorno-Karabakh is stated clearly so that goods and other products can arrive. But at the moment, there is a blockade. There needs to be an international observatory to verify how access can be provided. The agreement is not being respected. So how can we ensure respect for this agreement that was concluded between Azerbaijan and Armenia? Frozen conflicts can rapidly thaw and become very dangerous. There was an agreement on Ukraine, for example, which ended up with a Russian attack on Ukraine. How can we ensure that this agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan is actually respected in practice?
Thank you very much. High Representative, to respond.
Gracias, señoría. Ya me gustaría a mí.
Thank you very much. I'd like to have the ability to be able to make sure that the agreements that are forged between the various parts, that they are indeed implemented in a sustainable, in a permanent fashion. But unfortunately, that's not the way things are. Sometimes agreements end up in some sort of deadlock situation or quagmire, and it doesn't work out. And frequently there aren't those possibilities of implementing the agreement, and we have these types of situations. Well, a wonderful example of that is what's going on at the checkpoint. All pressure has been exerted through the United Nations so that this checkpoint justified for very, very clear reasons, because of the geography there as well, that we don't have a blockage, in other words, and allow for people and goods to be able to go back and forth to Nagorno-Karabakh, to the people in that particular enclave. Now, that might be a bit optimistic, or maybe one has to be a bit optimistic, because step by step, through partial implementation, we have avoided to a war, to conflict reigniting in the region. In other words, to armed conflict once again. We don't have victims, at least right now, and we hope that the diplomatic efforts that are being made, that they maintain this situation of relative tranquility on the ground as the negotiations take place and continue. Thank you.
Karen Melchior for a follow-up question.
Tusind tak for deres svar. Jeg ved godt, at vi...
Yes, thank you very much for your response. Well, I do understand that we can't ask for miracles, but at the very least, we cannot ensure respect for international law, it seems. When it comes to prisoners of war from Azerbaijan, they don't even have telephone contact with their families. They are not being returned, and what can we do so that these prisoners of war can be reunited with their families?
Thank you very much. High Representative, any comments?
Sí, tampoco le satisfará mi pregunta.
Well, I'm sure you won't like my answer, but I don't have any other to give you. All we can do in these types of situations is to continue with negotiations to put the problem that you raised on the table as part of the agreements. That was done with Moldova, and that's what will be done in the upcoming meeting as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have the Greens group with Marketa Gregorova.
All right, thank you very much, and welcome, Mr. Borrell. Well, there are some ongoing peace treaty negotiations, or should be, and given the current situation where actually the agreement from 2020 was broken by the setup of the checkpoint from Azerbaijani side in the Lachin corridor, I would like to ask you whether you have any assessment of how the peace treaty negotiations can go on right now, given this hindering of the possibility of any peace negotiations? Then my other question would be related to the mission. You already mentioned several things about it, but I would really like to know, in relation to the blockade, what the mission already done, what it can do, and how it can help on the ground. You said it can't do everything, so I wonder what it does, actually, if you can share that with us. And thirdly, also, considering the complex ethnic dimension of the issue, of the Nagorno-Karabakh issue, I would like to know what are the long-term measures and plans that you and the Commission has that we can do in the region, and with what help? Thanks.
Thank you very much, High Representative.
Sí, comprendo que
I understand that the situation in the Latin corridor is concerning to you. It worries me as well. But, you know, you can ask the same question 10 times. I'm not going to be able to give you a different answer. The mission cannot put an end to this checkpoint. Can't put an end to it existing or operating. We simply don't have that capability. It's not an armed mission. It has no coercive abilities. It's a mission that's part of the peace procedure, but is not a substitute for that. It does not have this capacity. The only solution will be diplomatic. And if there is to be a solution, it will be part in the framework of the negotiations that are currently underway. You may not see this, but there has been progress. Both parties want to continue with the negotiations. I think it's the 20th or the 12th of July, and there is some hope that a solution may be found to the problem as a whole. But trying to put an end to this checkpoint, that's something that we simply can't do.
Thank you very much, Marketa Gregorova, for a follow-up question.
Yes, sorry. I originally did not want to actually ask a follow-up question, but you answer something I did not ask. I did not ask the mission to end the blockade. Of course, that's very logical, and no one here is asking that. I asked what the mission is then doing, and you can share that with us. So can you share something with us? What is the mission doing?
I'm sure the High Representative can share that.
is with their presence, just with the presence of 100 people deployed along the border, is supporting the peace process. Controlling what's going on in the border, the presence, just the presence of the mission, seen from one side or the other, as an important contribution to keep things calm, to identify any incident, to prevent that these incidents could develop and spread around, to keep informed both parts about any possibility of a spark that can create another difficult situation, to identify the needs of the population. That's what a civilian mission do.
Thank you very much. And now, to conclude the first round of speakers, I give the floor to Fabio Castaldo.
Thank you, Chair. Dear High Representative, querido Alto Representante Borrell, first of all, I would like to thank you for being here today with us for discussing once again the relationship between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Despite the fact that the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh, and especially in the Lachin corridor, continue to cause concern due to the volatility of the security environment, I strongly believe that it's now time to devote all our attention to the relationship between the two capitals. Indeed, we are now seeing a window of opportunity for a comprehensive peace agreement, and I do believe it is essential that our Union plays a major role in this phase, not only by brokering the negotiations, but also in what concerns the guarantees that the Armenian side rightfully demands. talking about the negotiations, what role we can play in ensuring that the potential peace deal is truly acceptable by both sides, thus avoiding a recrudescence of the hostilities in the future. What we can do to facilitate the return of the war prisoners held by Baku, actually isolated from their families. And on the practical side, what can be our contribution to the international mechanism for guaranteeing the security of the Armenian population residing in Nagorno-Karabakh? Do you see any involvement and subsequent reinforcement of our CSDP mission on the ground? Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Representative.
Señoría, la Unión Europea.
The European Union is very committed in the South Caucasus region. And unlike other geopolitical actors, we don't have any hidden agenda. The European Union is interested in building peace and helping to build peace for all the people in the region. And how do we do this? Well, as I said before, we do this through humanitarian assistance missions, through negotiations, as are currently underway, through the demining process in regions that are seriously affected by the war, and looking to help those who've been affected through identifying flashpoints for violence and instability, to try to deal with those as soon as they are found, and also to try to reduce the risk of conflict reappearing. And this all requires day-to-day presence on the ground, dealing with the whole range of small circumstances that it's difficult to imagine standing here. But without our humanitarian assistance, without the demining activities, without looking for disappeared people, without the work that we're doing to free up prisoners of war, the situation would be much worse than it is. And that's why we have to continue doing what we're doing. If you have any other ideas about what more we could do, then I would be very open to hearing them.
Thank you very much. Fabio Castaldo, any follow-up question?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Dear our representative, following your suggestion, I wanted to ask you, in fact, one of the key issues that I think would be very important for the peace process, the mining, the militarized zones. If a mutually acceptable, internationally guaranteed peace agreement is to be reached, we must make sure that all the areas affected by hostilities are made safe for the civilians. Our Union and the Member States have a consistent experience in the mining, and thus I was wondering if we already have offered our full support to this end, and if this can be done through a proper CSDP mission really focused on the mining, or agreed bilaterally on an ad hoc basis. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. High Representative? No comments on this remark. So we will continue. And still in the first round of speakers, I give the floor to Anna Fotiga, ECR Group.
Thank you, President. High Rep Vice President, hot stages of the Armenian-Azerbaijani war were accompanied by unprecedented information campaign or information warfare, engaging both sides and third parties as well. Similar information campaign accompany, unfortunately, also the negotiations. I would like to commend involvement of international community, including the EU and yourself, in supporting, enhancing the process that is extremely important, negotiations, ongoing negotiations of both parties. Are you aware of the engagement of Russian Federation in trying to undermine this process?
Thank you very much. High Representative, to respond.
Influence on the ground.
Influence on the ground, not only of Russia, is there. The geopolitical situation in the zone.
It has been complex for centuries. And once again, I repeat, contrary to other international actors, the European Union has not a hidden agenda or hidden interest. We are only motivated by ensuring lasting peace and stability in the region. But Russia's action, and in particular Russia's attack against Ukraine, has had a lasting and a negative impact, both politically and economically, at the regional, global level, and in particular in the South Caucasus. Russia's current focus in its war against Ukraine has having a significant impact on the geopolitical balance in the South Caucasus. You know that Armenia, as a member of the Russia-led Collective Security Treaty Organization, CSTO, requested military support from the CSTO last September 2022, when the latest military escalation with Azerbaijan took place. But Armenia received no support, neither from Russia nor from the CSTO. But we know also that there are Russian peacekeeper troops deployed in the Karabakh, thanks to an agreement with the Azerbaijan government, and it is certainly an important aspect of the Russian role in this conflict.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any follow-up question? One, yes.
Vice President, High Representative, it seems that whenever Russia has a difficult stage in war against Ukraine, for example, now with blowing up of the New Kakhovka dam, it tries to portray its peacekeeping role in the Caucasus. Is it so that this involvement in this process is simply needed by Russia in order to keep certain support in non-West sphere?
Thank you very much.
You may interpret it like this. It's a matter of interpretation. Why Russia is doing that, it depends on many, many reasons that you can imagine, and others will look at that in a different manner. But certainly, we need some presence of a peacekeeper. And Russia was in condition to do that because it was accepted by Azerbaijan. It was not the case for anyone else. So I don't think that the presence of these Russian troops in this part of the world, in the middle of this conflict, could be considered something that it's adding difficulties. No. In this case, what happens in Ukraine, the negotiations for the peace that we are taking place, they are not being jeopardized by the presence of these Russian troops in this role of peacekeeper in the region.
Thank you very much. So now this closes the first round of speakers. So from now on, we won't have follow-up questions. I see some colleagues from the EPP asking to confirm if they are on the list. They are on the list, but I have 7 requests from the EPP, so it won't be possible to give you the floor to you all. But the next one is our EPP colleague, Lucas Forlas.
Mr. Borrell, because you said that the European observers are not authorized to go into the region, I went myself. 600 kilometers by car in order to see what the situation was. I saw people without electricity, people without any access to very basic, absolute necessary things to survive, people trying to use Azerbaijani passports in order to make do there. At the same time, the Russian peacekeepers that you mentioned earlier on, I saw them just sitting there doing absolutely nothing. My question is very specific. The two sides are in dialogue right now. When you take the victim to discuss with the victimizer, well, the only thing that happens is that the victimizer wins time and the victim dies. Humanitarian aid is not enough in these areas. People here, are asking what we're doing here. They're saying, what are you doing for us? When we went to the border of Armenia with Azerbaijan, just those days when I was there, there were conflicts, there were clashes on the border with 4 victims. On that particular occasion when I was there, what can the European Union do at this point?
The European Union does what we can do. If you have some concrete idea for me to consider, please tell me. We do everything we can. And if we don't do more, it's because we cannot do more. If you believe that we can do something more, please tell me.
Thank you very much. Now, Kostas Mavridis, you've got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear High Representative, right here. In January of this year, we had a long discussion in the plenary session regarding the blockade of Lachin corridor, which I want to concentrate. As you know, 120,000 native Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, including 30,000 children, with no medicine, no food, they were blockaded by the Azerbaijanis, and after that, we had the binding International Court of Justice order that requires Azerbaijan to take all measures at its disposal to ensure unimpeded movement of persons and so on. And what has Azerbaijan done since then? Nothing. And here is my question to you. With all the understanding, do you consider today Azerbaijan as a reliable partner? Second question, very specific. If what I described to you based on facts, if you disagree, let us know so. But if the facts are right, then is Azerbaijan committing a crime like ethnic cleansing? Yes or no? And do you consider the response of the EU so far as proportionate to the crime in the making? Thank you.
Thank you very much. High Representative, please.
As I said, the situation there has been complex for many, many years. We are trying to look for a diplomatic solution. It will certainly not to help to look for this solution to start today discussing and blaming one side or the other. I know personally, as well as you know, which is the situation in the ground. And as I said, we do what we can do, providing humanitarian assistance and putting diplomatic and political efforts and pressure on the parts, and in particular in the case of Azerbaijan. Is Azerbaijan a reliable partner? Well, it depends for what. But in any case, it's one of the parts in the conflict. And when there is a conflict and there are two parts in the conflict, what do you have to do to talk with two of them and to make them to sit together and to try to look for a solution? And that's what the European Union is doing. Understand?
Thank you very much. So next speaker, Nathalie Loiseau. You've got the floor.
Monsieur le représentant.
High Representative, around a year ago, Mrs. von der Leyen called Azerbaijan a reliable partner. Well, there's a bad smell of gas around that strange statement. 12 billion cubic meters of gas are to be delivered in 2023 from Azerbaijan and more in future. So is that why the Commission is doing and saying nothing to help the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh who have been blockaded for the last 6 months by Azerbaijan? Well, if you like realpolitik, they'll say that defending our interests has to come before defending our values. But it's quite clear that Maliyev was not going to stick to its commitments because its country does not produce enough gas. Rather, they have signed an agreement with Gazprom. It's now very difficult to know whether we're importing gas from Azerbaijan or relabeled Russian gas. So my question to you, Mr. High Representative, is Brussels' silence being bought with gas that turns out to be Russian gas at the end of the day?
Mr. High Representative, you got the floor.
Madame Loiseau, si su pregunta la debo interpretar.
Well, I ought to interpret your question, Madame Loiseau, is whether I consider the Memorandum of Understanding on Energy Matters that was signed by the President of the Commission with Azerbaijan, whether that was done without taking into consideration the problem, human rights issues, or the democracy deficit in that country, or whether there was any influence exercised by the European Union with regard to the conflict in favor of Azerbaijan. Well, let me tell you that this partnership, this energy partnership, has not influenced in the least the European Union in its position as concerns the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia. The European Union has maintained a very balanced position, recognized by the two parties in the conflict, and this has allowed us to be considered as a good, honest broker to be able to contribute to resolving this particular conflict. And this agreement was not forged at the expense of the capacity to be able to carry on this political dialogue, nor has it affected our capacity to be able to exercise any sort of criticism with regard to rule of law, human rights, as concerns Azerbaijan. And it's very clearly specified that it will be until 2024, this particular agreement, which was signed in 2018. In other words, those particular issues were a very, very key priority element in our relations and in the agreement forged. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now the next speaker on my list, Miriam Laxman.
I would like to echo many colleagues who said that very little has been done in order to help to settle this conflict, and not enough has been done in order to provide security and humanitarian aid to the 1,200,000 people, 200,000 people and 30,000 children in Nagorno-Karabakh. We have been for too long closing our eyes to the human rights breaches in Azerbaijan and done by the Azeri regime. And as colleague Wazo already mentioned, we have a leverage because Azerbaijan is our partner. This is pursued by bilateral agreements. This is pursued by the energy partnership. We have increased the import of energy, and this gives us stronger position to leverage and exert pressure on Azerbaijan in order to improve the humanitarian situation, in order to improve human rights. We have been many times saying that economic cooperation is a way how to change and improve human rights in the third countries. We have to use this leverage. Thank you.
Thank you. High Representative, please.
Believe me, I understand you. I understand your frustration, not being able to resolve in a quicker fashion the problem that exists there. I share your concerns and your worries. And I can't say that I'm absolutely satisfied with the result of our work, because the situation continues to be what it is. But I would have liked that, aside from saying that we're not doing enough, that I would have liked if people here were a little bit more constructive. Tell me what in addition ought to be done. Because Charles Michel, Macron, Chancellor Scholz were activated on all fronts here with the peace mission, with the humanitarian aid, the demining operations. It's not enough. It's not enough. It is not enough. The agreement with Azerbaijan, with the President of the Commission, Gas for Europe, to the benefit of all, including you. This doesn't change our position as concerns the conflict. We can use this as leverage in the negotiations. We can use that as leverage. But you know what the limits are. And I reiterate, for this debate to have meaning, aside from you saying to me, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, I would like for you to tell me what you would like me to do in addition.
Thank you very much. Now the next speaker, Peter van Dalen.
Ja, meneer Borrell, is een conflict.
Mr. Borrell, yes, there is a conflict. For too long, Azerbaijan has created a blockade around Nagorno-Karabakh. No drinking water, medicine, electricity. And Ilham Aliyev, the dictator, is at the root of this. Aliyev feels that he has support because of the gas contracts that have been signed with the EU. So let's chuck these contracts in the bin. Secondly, you can put a deadline on the blockade. On the 1st of August, the blockade has to be over. And if not, you will proceed with sanctions. And you will place sanctions on all of the officials who are involved in this conflict, all of the Azeri officials who are linked to this, the leaders, anyone involved. That's two concrete suggestions. So throw gas contracts away and put a deadline on the blockade. Otherwise, there'll be sanctions. That's concrete for you.
En efecto, son cosas.
Actually, these are very concrete things. If I convey to my colleagues, the ministers of foreign affairs, for them to take into consideration, indeed, these are very concrete issues. Thank you.
Now, the next speaker is Jordi Soler.
High Representative, I would like to put the focus on the broader negotiations towards a peace settlement. It is true that there have been intense and commendable diplomatic efforts in recent months, including from the EU. That's true. There's been 5 rounds of negotiations, discussions in Brussels. During these discussions, different issues have been tackled, issues like the limitation of the border, connectivity issues, including the Lashin corridor, humanitarian issues, the release of prisoners. It seems that, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's been little progress thus far, but to me the cornerstone will be the final status of Nagorno-Karabakh, where there is fundamental disagreement between the two sides. Concrete commitments are needed to guarantee the rights and the security of the native Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh and for the protection of their heritage and their culture. I am afraid there won't be any comprehensive and fair peace agreement without that. So I would like to ask you, Mr. Borrell, what is your view on the need to agree on the final status for Nagorno-Karabakh and what minimum criteria should this status meet? Thank you.
Thank you very much. High
Como usted sabe,
Representative.
señor diputado,
As you know, member, of the European Parliament. These particular negotiations are being conducted by the President of the Council. It's not within my sphere of competence. It's not part of my remit, and I can't provide you any additional information, anything further beyond what you already know. And after the last meeting that took place in Moldova, and with the prospects which have been presented in the media as well, I really can't respond to your question with more content or more essence, if you like. We really don't know. We really don't know. The only thing that we know is that the two parts have recognized the territorial integrity of each part in concrete terms, and for the first time, and this may be slightly irrelevant, is that Armenia has included Karabakh as part of the territory of Azerbaijan. But what the final outcome will be, I can't say. If I'm not mistaken, on the 22nd of May meeting, Prime Minister Pashinyan said in a press conference as concerns the recognition of the territorial integrity and the inclusion of Nagorno-Karabakh, that this is the first time that an Armenian leader, in this case Pashinyan, that he expressed it in such an unambiguous fashion. It was totally unambiguous what he had to say as concerns the place of Nagorno-Karabakh within the territorial sovereignty of Azerbaijan. And we do hope that Baku will come forth with a positive narrative, with a clear message for the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh concerning their rights, their security, once again their rights, that they be fully respected. That is one of the messages of the agreement, which ought to go hand in hand with the other points in the negotiation process, and any sort of hostile acts and the rhetoric, the negative narrative and the hostility, that will have to all be calmed down, that will have to be brought down. And this, of course, would facilitate the negotiations moving forward in a positive fashion. Thank you.
Much. Now I give the floor to Andrius Kubilius.
Well, Mr. High Representative, really, as you have mentioned, the issue of relations in between of Armenia and Azerbaijan is really very complicated. We have seen two wars. One was won by Armenia, then Azerbaijan was complaining that territory is occupied. Now it's won by Azerbaijan, and of course there are still a lot of pain. So that is why really I would like to use this opportunity to praise Armenian Prime Minister Pashinyan for his very clear statement on recognition of Karabakh, on recognition of Azerbaijan sovereignty on Karabakh territory. That is really what is possibly will open the doors for a settlement of peace agreement, long-term peace agreement. And I would like also to praise EU Council President for his engagement in these negotiations. But as it was mentioned, really one issue still is pending, and that is very clear, that Armenians are worried about the human rights of Armenian people who are living in Karabakh. And my question would be very simple. I understand that Armenia, do not trust Azeri promises to keep those human rights under protection. Is it possible that EU would play some kind of very specific role, trying to be in between, trying to settle down very clear, agreements how those human rights can be settled, how those human rights can be protected?
Thank you very much. Now I give the floor to the High Representative to respond.
Well, yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have been informed of cases of arbitrary detention which have been carried out against people such as journalists or human rights defenders, lawyers as well. Some of those quite well-known human rights lawyers, such as Mr. Sadikov. Our delegation has established contact with victims of these types of abuses. We have been in touch with their lawyers as well, and we have openly expressed our concern. And that's in the dialogue with authorities at the highest levels. We'll continue to do that as part of our dialogue on human rights. That's not just something that's happened on the territory, but outside of the territory and in Europe. Accusations of interference of the Azeri authorities in certain areas has to be properly investigated by the competent national authorities. As I've said, we've expressed our concern. And we've done that dialogue in all levels with Azerbaijan. It's an issue that's been put on the table.
Thank you very much. So the next speaker is Bogdan Zonka.
Thank you so much. My speech will be on Polish. Bardzo dziękuję za tą.
Thank you so much for this very interesting discussion. I'm really impressed by the details in many of the questions, but my question is also, well, it will be probably difficult to answer it, because why, despite the fact that Charles Michel, as the President of the Council, was negotiating between Armenia and Azerbaijan, why still this agreement between the two countries, why was it concluded with the knowledge and with the invitation to discussion for Putin? Is it so that always in this area we have to talk about any situation involving Putin?
Thank you very much. Now, High Representative, do you want to respond, please?
Señoría. Ladies and gentlemen, as you mentioned, the issue is very difficult to respond to. I don't have any information with regard to the way the negotiations went between the Council President and the involvement of President Putin. Is that what you're referring to? There was no involvement of his of any way, shape, or form. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President, for giving me a floor. I think everything has been said, and as a rapporteur for Azerbaijan, my role is really ungrateful. High Representative, we are trying to play, as a European Union, equidistant role in the conflict situation. Have you considered maybe discussing with different parts why European Union role is not accepted as observer in Nagorno-Karabakh, because we don't have a proper information. Is there any ongoing discussion to maybe have acceptable mission that could give us a true account of what is going on the ground, because we cannot have an assessed properly situation unless we have this information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Representative.
No, lo siento, no tengo ningún.
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't have any information in particular to give you on this. I'm sorry about that.
No puedo contestar.
I'm unable to answer your question, I'm sorry. I don't know.
That's an answer, yes. So the very last speaker, François Alfonsi.
Oui, Monsieur le Commissioner, thank you for being here and your reply and the interest in this debate. It shows to what extent the European Parliament and Europe in general is sensitive to the situation in Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. In one of your first interventions, you said you implemented the most pressure. The debate showed that what we could have put in place is sanctions. The future could be the completion of a peace process. It could also be a worsening of the situation. And where the effects for the Armenian population in Nagorno-Karabakh, will sanctions be taken by the EU to prevent an outcome based on the use of force and military aggression?
Thank you very much. High Representative, to respond.
Sería tan amable, señor diputado.
Sorry, could I ask you to repeat your question, please? Sorry, I'd need to make sure that I've understood correctly before I respond.
Trouve bien. Voilà, merci. I certainly can. I was saying that in your previous interventions, you said that maximum pressure had been applied. And during the debate, we found that the pressure from sanctions hasn't been implemented and they remain available. The most pessimistic scenario would be a worsening of the situation and ethnic cleansing in Nagorno-Karabakh, given the military superiority of Azerbaijan. Are you thinking of sanctions being taken to prevent that outcome taking place?
Usted sabe las.
You know what we generally tend to refer to as sanctions. Well, there can be restrictive measures against individuals or entities, and these are decisions taken by the Council. For the time being, there's been no member state that has brought forward a proposal to apply any sanctions in this area. That doesn't mean that it might not happen based on events. And as I said in response to your colleague as well, I will convey to my colleagues responsible foreign affairs the fact that there are voices in the Parliament who are calling for sanctions to be applied to try and address the situation in Nagorno-Karabakh. I will convey your concerns, and if member states consider it opportune, they will debate that.
Thank you very much, High Representative and Vice President, for coming and for your answers. Thank you also to all the colleagues who participated. And we will move on with our agenda. Now my notes are in Portuguese, so I turn into Portuguese to say that o próximo ponto da ordem do dia.
The next item on our agenda is declaration from the Vice President and High Representative on the situation in Lebanon, and representing the Commission, we will have Commissioner Lenarčič, and I'd like to give the Commissioner the floor to address this point. Thank you very much.
President, honourable members of the European Parliament, today's debate is a timely opportunity to discuss the situation of Lebanon, particularly in view of tomorrow's important vote by the Lebanese Parliament to elect a president, which is its 12th attempt. Also, this debate comes right before the opening of the 7th Brussels Conference on international assistance to the Syrian refugees and the future of Syria. Lebanon remains an essential partner, not only in its own right, but also for broader regional stability. This is why we have been strongly engaged on Lebanon since the beginning of the crisis in late 2019. We deployed an election observation mission during the May 2022 elections, which was headed by the honourable member of this House, Mr. Hölveni. We developed a people-centered bilateral cooperation focusing on the most vulnerable. We have maintained our assistance to Syrian refugees and to the Lebanese hosting communities alike. We have increased our humanitarian assistance. I personally visited Lebanon in March and announced a new package worth 60 million euros in humanitarian aid. The European Union has consistently raised the issue of accountability at the UN Human Rights Council after the tragic Beirut harbor explosion in 2020. And we have mitigated the impact of the Russian invasion of Ukraine through enhanced security, food security and resilience support. But we are very disappointed and concerned at the lack of developments on the Lebanese side. Lebanon's democratic institutions are grinding to a halt, one after the other. First, the government, which is in a caretaker capacity since May 2022. Then the president, whose seat is vacant since end of October. And now even at municipal level, the May local elections have been postponed again, and no new date has been set. All this institutional erosion is unfolding against the background of a collapsing economy, a plummeting currency, and a derelict banking sector. And yet, there is no real sense of urgency among the Lebanese ruling elite. A staff-level agreement with the IMF is now more than a year old, and there are no signs of its endorsement by political leaders. In this context, the EU should remain engaged in the Lebanese crisis and ready to use all instruments at its disposal. Member States will review the EU framework of restrictive measures on Lebanon at the end of July, and all options are on the table. We have addressed Lebanon at the October, November, and most recently at the April Foreign Affairs Councils to stress the urgency of breaking the double gridlock, both institutional and economic. Lebanon cannot afford to compound economic meltdown with institutional vacuum. The enactment of long overdue economic and governance reforms under a fully fledged IMF program remains the top priority. It is a prerequisite for any possible macro-financial support, not only from the EU, but also from many other like-minded partners. Consequently, swift presidential elections, government formation, and municipal elections are more essential than ever. The situation of Syrian refugees in Lebanon is also of great concern. The EU recognizes Lebanon's generosity and remains committed to helping Lebanon in hosting refugees. It is important to underline that our assistance actually benefits both the refugees and the Lebanese host communities to an equal extent. For example, when we fund a medical center for refugees, it will also serve host community. To this aim, the 7th Brussels Conference on Supporting the Future of Syria and the region is meeting tomorrow to mobilize further international support. Last year's conference raised a total amount of 6.4 billion euros. We hope we can secure even more international funding this year. Finally, the return of the refugees needs to be handled in a cooperative spirit, without being politicized and in line with the UNHCR requirements, notably the principles of non-refoulement and voluntariness. I thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the debate.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Now we move on for the first round of speakers of political groups, starting with EPP and our colleague David McAllister. You've got the floor.
Mr. President, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, for months now, the current situation in Lebanon is extremely alarming. Lebanon has the largest per capita number of refugees in the world. The state is nearly collapsing due to the political, economic, social, financial and health crisis, and in the end, a state of institutional breakdown. Since the last general elections in May 2022, which I was able to observe on the ground, a fully fledged government has still not been formed. Lebanon needs to swiftly elect a president and break the institutional gridlock. Operational and functioning public institutions are urgently required to start pursuing long overdue reforms without any further delay to strengthen accountability, to increase transparency and to tackle corruption. Colleagues, it is regrettable that the municipal elections have been postponed again. Proper democratic and free local elections must be held without any delay. The European Union should provide technical and financial assistance to enable these elections to be held in the best possible conditions. And finally, almost 3 years have passed since the Beirut port explosion. A transparent, independent, neutral and effective investigation into this explosion must be a priority. Commissioner Lelachik, given the dire situation in Lebanon, the EU must now engage to prevent the state collapse and to help alleviate the suffering of the Lebanese people with a strong, critical and demanding focus on delivering reforms. Thank you.
Danke, Herr Kollege.
Thank you. Isabel Santos has the floor now.
Mr. President, Mr. Commissioner, dear colleagues, a corrupção endemic.
Endemic corruption, political system which doesn't work, problems in the banking system, impunity, all these facts have pushed Lebanon to absolute chaos over the past recent years. Now we obviously have a transitional government, but we need to ensure IMF intervention, implementation of the economic recovery programme. In the past, Lebanon was known as Switzerland in the Middle East, but now 82% of its population lives in poverty. And there's only 2 or 3 hours of electricity per day. This is paralysing the economy, stopping schools and hospitals, which are already dealing with a lack of staff and medication. Humanitarian aid within this framework, and when the country has been host to 1.5 million Syrian refugees, humanitarian aid is absolutely vital, but that's not enough. As you've said yourself, that's not enough. We need to enact reforms. We need to give clear signals. We will not agree with those who destroy the lives of the Lebanese people. We know their names. We have the necessary mechanisms available to us. We need to act because the country cannot wait any longer.
Thank you, Monsieur Christophe.
Thank you. Christoph Grudler is the next speaker.
Monsieur le commissaire, Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, I would have liked the words fighting corruption to be part of the title of this debate. Corruption is, in fact, a scourge in Lebanon to the detriment of the entire Lebanese people. 3 years after the explosion in the port of Beirut, the Lebanese want to live in a society where justice can work, where the state is transparent and where they have a decent livelihood and democratic life works. In Beirut last year, I once again was struck by the resilience of the Lebanese, their optimism, their ability to rebuild. But I also saw a system on its knees in the throes of agony where only the wealthiest can hold their heads above water. What are we waiting for, colleagues, before we react firmly against that corruption, which is a gangrene on the country? A war, an insurrection, another even more tragic explosion? We must help Lebanon exit this corrupt system and release aid to the people of Lebanon. The people need us now without wasting any more time.
Thank you. Next speaker is Munir Satouri.
Monsieur le Président.
President, Commissioner, the detonation of the port in Beirut in the 4th of August in 2020 is still resonating. Lebanon has been set back by its internal events, by the conventional lines, the lack of a sense of responsibility by its leaders, laissez-faire internationally. The result, Lebanon has corruption and an incredible crisis, 330% inflation. Families have to spend half of their income on water. I'm thinking about Emmanuel Macron. His promises were hollow. There has been no sanctions imposed. The Syrian refugees have been made scapegoats. Normalization of the butcher of Damascus is ongoing. We should send a clear message. Lebanese politicians should stop corruption. They shouldn't try to find scapegoats and put themselves at the service of the needs of the Lebanese people.
Merci.
Thank you. Adam Bilan is the next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today we address the alarming situation in Lebanon, where the ongoing conflict has led to an alarming surge in poverty, now affecting approximately 74% of its population. This crisis is not limited to Lebanese citizens alone. Lebanon is currently home to approximately 1.5 million Syrian refugees, with an astounding 90% of them living in extreme poverty. The nation's political landscape is also a cause for concern, as foreign involvement, especially Iran's support for Hezbollah, exacerbates the political impasse and deepens the crisis. In light of these circumstances, we must aid Lebanon in seeking durable solutions for refugees and encouraging structural reforms. The EU and Member States, in collaboration with like-minded countries, should assess further steps to support efforts to restore stability and reduce poverty. We remain committed to supporting the people of Lebanon who desire peace, stability and democratic governance. Thank you.
Thank you. Monsieur Thierry Mariani, the floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Commissaire, j'ai compris que demain, il y a une conférence.
President, Commissioner, I've heard there's a refugee conference tomorrow of all days, but if you'll allow me, like my colleagues, I'd like to say I've been to Lebanon a number of times. What they want is not to help them keep the refugees, but to help return the refugees. When you were saying earlier that the European Union is helping the refugees and helping local government, do you really think that villages in Lebanon, which now at times have to have 2 school times a day, once for the Lebanese in the morning and then for the Syrians in the afternoon because they have too many refugees, do you really think their first priority is supporting the return of refugees to their country? Well, the EU is so far refusing to do that as a political choice. We don't want to recognise it, that we have to negotiate with the Syrian regime, but colleagues, whether we like it or not, they won the war. Are we going to be paying them for 50 years to keep refugees on Lebanese territory? I make a comparison with the French population. Imagine that there were 22 million refugees in France. Proportionately, that's what the refugee population would make up if it was the same as in Lebanon. Now, in terms of their government, I think there needs to be an end to interference, as a number of colleagues have said. There have been many promises and sometimes threats, as President Macron did when he visited, but still nothing as yet. The Lebanese are still waiting for our support in this difficult period and in the long term, maybe to allow the refugees to go back home so that they can finally be masters in their own household.
Next speaker is Ms. Marisa Matias.
Muito obrigada, Sr. Presidente, Sr. Comissário.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, Lebanon is going through a huge economic and social crisis and a political situation which remains gridlocked. We remember the protests in 2019 when people, and above all young people, came out onto the streets concerned about their lack of a future. There was degraded public services, there was no social protection, there was impunity and corruption. The explosion in the port of Beirut worsened the situation even further, and no liability was ascribed. There is extreme conditionality as well. Monies given by the IMF does not allow the people to live in Lebanon. However, Lebanon, proportionally speaking, has most refugees from Syria who joined thousands from Palestine as well. In times of hate, we cannot allow that there is no support for those who have the least. And here the EU has a fundamental role to play.
Thank you. Ms. Kinga Gal, the floor is yours.
President, Commissioner, dear colleagues, Lebanon has been in economic and political crisis for years. The state ceased to function, and this situation is aggravated by the need to care for millions of refugees. With no action there may be further waves of migration targeting Europe. Christian churches play an especially important role in social care in Lebanon, and that is why the European Commission should give direct assistance and support to these Christian churches, and they are in a position to help. And by supporting these churches, we would support the refugees. Hungary, through Hungary Helps, an assistance program, has been helping Christian churches and rebuilding homes and contributing to these people being able to stay in their countries. Europe must play a role in crisis management because instead of mass migration.
The next speaker is Andrei Kovacic.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Commissioner, colleagues. For several years now, we have been witnessing the dire situation unfolding in Lebanon, with a social, economic and political crisis entangled to create an extremely worrying situation, which is becoming more difficult day by day. We must address this and advocate for a sustainable path towards political stability, prosperity and progress. I would like to urge all stakeholders in Lebanon to prioritise the national interest. It is time to work toward a unified vision to ensure that Lebanon has a future. The elections of a president and putting together a government is a crucial step towards restoring stability, ensuring governance and rebuilding trust in the institutions, especially after in the aftermath of the Beirut blast. But, Commissioner, what we can do more, we can do even more. We should also think on personal targeted sanctions for those who are blocking the political transition and economic recovery of Lebanon. The international community, including the European Union, has to stand with Lebanon. The people of Lebanon desired a safe and predictable future. Thank you.
Danke.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Ruiz de Vesa.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President Karas. Thank you to the Commissioner as well for being with us. According to the World Bank, from October 2019, Lebanon has been affected by the most devastated crisis in its modern history. Now, these superlatives perhaps don't go far enough. The origin of this crisis includes deep-rooted corruption which undermines institutions and blocks change. However, there is an illustrative example, and that's the case of Riyad Salami, the governor of the Lebanese Central Bank. There are 7 European countries who are investigating this individual. He's been accused in Lebanon as well by 3 judges. There have been a number of arrest warrants against him, the last one by France on the 16th of May. There's also one from Germany, the 22nd of May. There's also a red alert from Interpol in relation to Mr. Riyad Salami. Investigations in Lebanon have been blocked by part of the political class, and the instructing magistrates have been removed from their positions. So, Commissioner, does the Commission have a framework? Do you have a framework decision on this individual? Are you prepared to use it to sanction Riyad Salami?
Thank you. Herr Kollege Dacian.
Tertius Cholos is the next speaker.
Ladies and gentlemen, Lebanon is going through multiple crises which imperil stability and democracy in the country. A political crisis, a financial and banking crisis, an energy crisis, and above all, a confidence crisis, which is made stronger by the feeling of impunity surrounding the Beirut port explosion, which caused hundreds of victims and thousands of wounded. Independent justice must be the priority for the new president and government. We recently met the families of the victims, 240 dead, including about 20 Europeans, 7,000 injured. No serious investigation in the killings has happened for the photographers, customs officers or soldiers who say the investigation is being blocked. An international investigation supported by the EU and the UNHCR into the biggest non-nuclear explosion in history must happen. This could help there be an internal legal inquiry, which is so necessary to regain confidence in the justice system. Thank you, Mrs. Anna Bonfrisco. You have the floor. Thank you, Vice President, Commissioner. Lebanon is going through one of the worst economic crises in the world, with a very high inflation rate and the currency devaluing. This has an impact on the livelihoods of the Lebanese and the millions of Syrians whom they host. Action to help the country operate is not happening, and it's being blocked politically. Hezbollah, the political military terrorist organisation supported by Iran, is stopping it. The elite are using state subsidies to fund alliances. We're contributing to it, but if Lebanon must help the Lebanese, Europeans and member states will go on helping to guarantee security in the Mediterranean.
Thank you. Jérôme Rivière, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président.
President, as has been said, I can't ignore the promise of protecting Middle East citizens. Lebanon has been presented by a model of multiculturalism. Multiculturalism has become multi-conflicts. It's an example of what should be avoided. Politically, it's always the people who suffer. The European Parliament, the Lebanese Parliament, and with all the different communities and Hezbollah, yet tomorrow's vote is a waste of time. All this use of violence, there we should have send out a message. We should support the Christian communities who are too often persecuted in this part of the world. Thank you. Georgi Hölveni is the next speaker.
Ich bedanke mich, Herr Vorsitzender. Dear Commissioner, tisztelt képviselőtársaim!
Dear colleagues, as the head of the election mission in 2022, I've been following up on the events in Lebanon from very close. Allow me to share two statements with you based on this experience. It would be a false promise that the European Union can solve the problems of Lebanon. Secondly, Lebanon does not need lessons preached from Europe, but it needs collaboration. But both parties have to do their jobs. For this, the political elite elected last year in Lebanon should do their jobs. Firstly, they have to hold presidential elections. Those who are blocking this process, those are blocking the vital reforms in the country, and they are also infringing the constitution. And Europe should have the means to stop this, to unlock the process. Colleagues, to resolve the situation of Syrian refugees is an issue which cannot be postponed any further. The European Union should help the return of refugees, but currently neither the political nor the humanitarian situation is appropriate in Syria to accommodate them. But we have to see clear that both Turkey and Lebanon will take action rather sooner than later. It's better that we Europeans sit at the table than being on the menu. We should set the agenda and we should not let others to do it for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Salima Yenbu is the next speaker.
Merci.
Thank you. Zaluni Shur Saya Bi Baladi Aid. They asked me what was happening in the country of celebrations. I was there a month ago with colleagues from the Renew group. I saw what is happening, a country without a president, with no parliamentary activity for 8 months, a country where politics is more about removing a judge who was protecting the victims of the port blast, a country where people have no access to basic requirements, water, food, electricity, healthcare, education, a country where the word justice means nothing. 2 years after our resolution, same debate, same situation, same responsibility of a political class which is hiding behind migrants and refugees to continue its corruption, its lack of interest in the Lebanese, its shameful administration, and with the current crisis, which the World Bank calls deliberate depression. Let's put in place targeted sanctions. Let's denounce people, name and shame, politicians, business people, and bankers who are responsible for this corrupt situation.
Simniok.
Thank you. Bernhard Simniok is the next speaker.
Herr Präsident.
President, in Lebanon, the situation is a homemade crisis that's getting more tragic. The rich and the elite in the country are thriving to the detriment of the people. 1.5 million Syrian refugees are there, unofficially many more. This is an additional burden in this tragic crisis. The refugees are suffering terribly. Child labour is needs be to ensure a family livelihood. Here, the EU could act effectively without any problem. It's just that diplomatic relations would have to be re-established with Assad. Syrian refugees in Europe and in Jordan and Turkey and Lebanon, the bordering countries, would be able to return. That would be a major political signal. The burden on the countries affected would therefore fall dramatically. So once again, diplomatic relations would help everyone, Europe, Turkey, Jordan, and of course, Syria, and above all, the refugees. So what are we waiting for?
Thank you. The next speaker is Jelania Zovko.
President Povjereniče Lenarčić, Lebanon finds itself today at a critical crossroads, facing a complex web of social, economic and political crises. Years of political instability have left the country with hyperinflation that has pushed so many below poverty line. Lebanon, known for hosting the highest number of refugees per capita in the world, is on the verge of humanitarian catastrophe. The absence of a president and a functioning government hinders economic recovery efforts because critical economic, fiscal and monetary reforms and investments in reconstructions are delayed. I call on Lebanon's political leadership to act swiftly and elect a president who can unite the country and enact the necessary reforms to rescue the economy from this long crisis. Lebanon's leaders must prioritize the interests of their country and people over personal ambitions and self-interest. Thank you.
Danke, Frau Kollegin.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jan-Christoph Oetjen.
President.
Thank you, President, Commissioner, colleagues. Lebanon is in a dramatic economic and financial crisis. Galloping inflation makes the population makes it life difficult. The exchange rate of the dollar has gone down to 1 to 90,000. It affects all areas of life. The reforms called for by the IMF can't be implemented because in Lebanon we have a corrupt class of politicians which defends its own interests before those of the country, and Hezbollah makes consensus impossible. In this difficult situation, we have 1.5 million Syrians in Lebanon. I think it's good, Commissioner, that you've mentioned the Syrian conference. This is important for Lebanon too. It's important we give an international sign that we're supporting Lebanon in this situation. Many Syrians have always worked in Lebanon. You have to say that. It's not about sending these Syrians back to Syria, because men in particular must fear not seeing their families again and not reappearing. We mustn't allow that. We must make sure that people who have fled to the war and the dictator will continue to be protected. In Lebanon, we must help these refugees to be supported in their own country. Thank you, colleagues. We now come to the Catch the Eye procedure. Antonio Lopez is the first speaker.
Catch the eyes.
Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you, Mr. President. The situation in Lebanon should concern all Europeans. Security is something that's vital for all of us, and it's a very country that's close culturally. We also have many trade links with Lebanon as well. What I think we need to be doing is the following. We are not intervening. We need to intervene. We need to follow the situation more closely. We need to try and improve the situation for the youth in Lebanon, because these people are fleeing the country. There's the case of Amar Hafous. The fact that they spoke here in this parliament, and apparently because there were Jews in the chamber, he's now being put before a military tribunal. So there's many cases that people don't want to mention, but we need to say things quite clearly. These things happen. There are military tribunals in Lebanon, and they're persecuting homosexuals in Lebanon as well. So we need to be clear with this. We need to put an end to this situation in Lebanon.
Thank you. I must say that the Catch the Eye procedure, you speak from your seat. Marina Arena is the next speaker.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, on l'a dit.
Thank you, President. We've said it. Endemic corruption in Lebanon is just making worse a chaotic situation that Lebanese people have been living in for years. 80% of the Lebanese are living below the breadline, and honest judges are toppled and replaced by corrupt ones. The central bank of Lebanon's president, Mr. al-Salami, is suspected of diverting lots of money. He's part of that. And then there's the issue of the investigation into the explosion in the port of Beirut. Yes, humanitarian aid is vital. We must help the Lebanese. We must not help the corrupt of Lebanon. The corrupt of Lebanon must be sanctioned. Mr. Rayad Salami must be sanctioned, as must all the judges today who are blocking the situation in Lebanon and stopping investigations into corruption. They must be sanctioned by the EU. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mick Wallace, next speaker.
Thanks very much, President. Lebanon is screaming out for stability. Inflation has spiralled out of control. Access to imports, fuel, machinery, food, education, medicine and healthcare is and has been at crisis level for a long time. And this is a country with the world's largest refugee population per capita. For historical and geographical reasons, the Lebanese political system is set up so external players generally must form a consensus on which presidential candidates go forward for election. It's encouraging then that there appears to be some tentative agreement about the candidacy of the Maronite Christian Suleiman Frangieh. Saudi Arabia, Syria and others in the region seem to be content, and even France, it looks like, might be backing them. Western media, on the other hand, is awash with stories about Hezbollah interference and the need for the steady hand of the IMF's man at the wheel to subject the country to even more economic pain. It's time for the US and our puppet states to stop their disastrous interference and let Lebanon have a modicum of stability. And let the refugees from Palestine go home as well to their proper home.
Monsieur Bellamy, you are the next one.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. All colleagues said Lebanon is going through a profound situation. The economy is bankrupt. Bankers have failed the country. The situation with the Syrian refugees is undermining the situation. Having said that, we must denounce those who are organizing the situation. There is responsibility. Hezbollah is responsible. Who is blocking the elections of the president, preventing the institutions of doing their work to serve the people? Who is preventing justice to punish the criminals? Who are responsible for the port explosion is Hezbollah, who is acting to destroy the sovereignty of the people at the service of foreign elements. We must sanction those who are responsible for this situation to free the Lebanese people finally. Thank you very much.
Danke, Frau.
Thank you. Ms. Elikia.
Dankeschön, President. Interesting to see French colleagues haven't lost their colonialism. So this is Lebanon, where the currency has suffered record depreciation, hyperinflation, where 1 child in 5 can no longer go to school, 40% of households cutting back on education spending, where public administration is regularly marked by strikes as desperate workers try to get their wages, a health system deteriorating, and what do we have to offer?